Okay, so we have the day together. I'm impressed, so many people give up a day to come and do practice. It's a very beautiful thing. In Bangkok, I don't usually try and do this because what happens during the day, people start slipping off. So I can only do it if I take them outside of Bangkok and then they can't get home because the van driver is my van driver. So. And then another time, we used to do small groups like this in the hotel, and people, during the walking meditation, some people would walk out on the balconies and on the roof. And what I found was they're all slipping down for ice cream and coffee. So I'm impressed that so many people will come out today. We're just going to have some interesting times with the Qigong, because we're somehow going to have to split into two groups, because there will be not enough room for Qigong for everybody together. So we'll have to figure something out about that after lunch. So the way that we understand the world is through stories. And those of you who know me know I'm very keen on stories and how stories work. And so we understand everything through little stories. If you are English, you have a story. If you are male or female, you have a story about that. You have a little philosophy of life. You think, well, life's short, you might as well enjoy yourself. I know someone, he had this little story. Everything that we know around the world, we understand, we have a little story about it. That's how human beings work. If something is happening and you don't have a story about it, you will start to feel rather confused and unhappy and kind of disconcerted, because you don't know where to place the event in your psyche. For example, you're sitting in your room on your computer and lorries go by outside, the planes go by overhead, the birds are tweeting. You don't notice any of that because you're playing with your computer. Sorry, you're working on your computer. But then a noise happens outside that you can't easily identify. What happens? You've got to know what it is. What's that funny noise that's going on outside? And so you get up and you look out the window, you try and identify what it is. I have it in this room here because the toilet makes a very funny noise after you've flushed it. And I think the water is somehow refilling into the tank. And it makes some really weird noises, sounds. They're not pleasant or unpleasant, but if you don't know what it is, you're like, have I done something wrong? Have I pressed the wrong button? Is there a pipe going to burst? So this is how we understand the world. We like to have a comfortable little story about the things around us. The story doesn't have to be true necessarily. Imagine thunder and lightning. People used to have stories. Oh, it's the gods having an argument again. This is the god Zeus and Hera having an argument, right? Or was Hera Greek? I can't remember. And that's a way to explain what's actually happening up there. The Thais have this great story that when there's an eclipse, they have some story, something's happening and they're covering up the sun. This demon is covering up the sun. And so what they have to do is scare the demon away. So they go out with pots and pans and start banging. And that scares the demon away, and then the sun reappears. And it works. Thais will do this, and if you ask them, they'll say they kind of believe the story, but they only half believe it. As usual, Thais just really want to have fun. So they have fun with it, going out banging pots and pans. It's a nice thing, cultural thing they teach their children. So we also have stories about life and death, how we come to be on the earth. All religions have creation stories. Which creation story is actually true? I don't think that's really important. You just want some way to understand things, really, so that you don't have to think about it. Because when you don't understand something, it's going to come into your attention. So we also have a story in Buddhism which I like to think of as a framework story. And this is the framework in which we're going to operate. And this framework story is that the universe has been around for beginningless time. You may say, no, it's 15 billion years since the Big Bang. I actually don't think the Big Bang is proven. Anyone wants to talk about that? I'll quite happily talk to you for hours about that. According to Buddhism, actually there was a Big Bang and the universe expanded or unfolded from a single point. And the universe has expanded out, but after a while it's going to fold back in and crunch up again. This is called the Big Bang and the Big Crunch, right? There is also some scientific theory also says the same thing. If there's enough gravity in the universe, eventually it'll start to come back together. So the universe unfolds and then it crunches up, and it unfolds and it crunches up for beginningless time. This is our creation story in Buddhism. And we've been around as a being, we don't know how long, but for billions of lifetimes we've been born as insects, as ghosts, as animals in hell realms. We've done good things, we've floated up to heavenly and pleasant realms, we've done bad things, and we've sunk down to hell realms for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, operating in ignorance, because animals and all these little beings, they don't understand the world around them. They don't understand what they have to do. I think of it a bit like dogs. In fact, I think of us as a bit like dogs. Because dogs don't understand the world around them, but they have little stories that help them get by. So a dog will know who's going to feed it. It knows who its friend dogs are and its non-friend dogs are. It knows that when someone rings a bell in a temple in Thailand, they have to howl. Did you know that? It's quite fun in the morning when they ring the bell at 4 or 5 a.m. The dogs all start howling, and then the howl spreads across the town. I think of that as a dog superstition. Right? Mummy dog says, every time you hear that bell in the morning, you have to howl, right? Like, why? I don't know why, that's just what you do. So, dogs don't understand democracy, they don't understand paying taxes, they don't understand money, they don't understand how your car works. In fact, most of us don't understand how the car works these days. But we have some idea, right? Okay, there's an engine, I pour in petrol, I turn it on. The dog's like, you get in and wow, it goes. It must be like magic. So I think of that as animals not understanding the universe around them. And so we have been that for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, unable to understand the world around us. And so not really having an opportunity to float up, to find enlightenment, to find truth, ultimate reality, whatever you call it. And then through some good luck, in fact, you have this saying printed on the wall up here that imagine a turtle swimming in the ocean, and every 100 years it raises its head. If there is a wreath floating on the ocean, how often would that turtle's head come through the wreath? Circle of flowers, right? So not very often. And this is, again, a story, but a story meant to give us the understanding how lucky it is that we have a human rebirth. So this is the framework story of Buddhism. Having gained to a human rebirth, we're just on the cusp. From this point now, we can go all the way up to enlightenment, or we can sink back down. I actually like to think that once you're human, you tend to stay human. I don't know, I just like to think that. I don't like to think that human beings drop down into unpleasant realms. So let's go with my version. So from this point, we've got just enough intellect, just enough intelligence, just enough questioning ability in order to start a practice to enlightenment. And beings any lower or simpler than us simply are not going to have that capacity. So this is the framework setting. We consider in Buddhism that this lifetime, this opportunity is really precious because we're right on that changing point. If we do our practice well and do our practice properly, we're going to accelerate up into enlightenment. I don't know why enlightenment is up. It's funny, most cultures think up is good and down is bad, right? I wonder what the birds think. I don't know. We're going to accelerate out to enlightenment. I don't know where it is, which direction it is. If we do the practice properly, if we do the practice correctly, if we waste the opportunity and we don't do the practice, we don't apply ourselves in the right way, then we can lose this opportunity. Who knows? I mean, who knows if we really are reborn from lifetime to lifetime? Is this just a story? If it is just a story, it's a story that the Buddha told in order to encourage people to do the practice. So the result is still the same. Whether there's evidence or not for rebirth and reincarnation and these things, whether we really have been insects and animals and all kinds of beings, well, I'll leave that to your speculation. But this is a story that we have so that we don't really need to think about it. We just need to get on with the practice. Not only that, but being born as a human being in this world, in this life, in this framework. It's quite lucky. Most times in history, people have not been able to turn their attention to spiritual things. And it's interesting that religions tend to prosper when agriculture is doing well. Bit of global warming, warm up the plants, speed up the environment, bit of application of science into farming. And when there's been enough food, that means people can turn their attention to other things. If we are born in a time, I often wonder if I was born in Germany in the 1910s, would I have marched off to war under Adolf Hitler? Probably. We don't have very much control over where we're born. And when we are born, we tend to absorb those thoughts and values from the culture around us. So if I was born at that time, I would probably have been one of 12 million Germans who marched off to war and died because of Adolf Hitler. And then a couple of lifetimes before that, I think I was probably born under Napoleon III in France. And then we joined with England to sail off to the Crimea and fight against the Russians. Most of the English and French died because of dysentery and yellow fever and diseases. And then the charge of the Light Brigade. Then, before that, probably being born in Napoleon the first time, I'd have marched off to war against the Austrians. I'd have probably hated the English then. If I was under Napoleon the First, I hate the English, but born under Napoleon the Third, I'd be friends with the English. We absorb the thoughts and values from the culture around us. And we don't have too much choice, really. So our fortune of being born in a time and a place where there's enough food, enough health service, as a safe society, we're not being flooded or being burnt out or drought or war. We have enough requisites, that is, we have enough money, we have enough time, we have enough food, we have good enough shelter, so that we have time to turn our attention to these things. This is a really precious thing. I don't know, I can't guarantee what happens when people die, whether you do get the chance to come back and practice again, heavens and hell realms. That's the story that's given to us, so that's the framework. Who knows, in the next lifetime, the next opportunity, when will I have chance again to practice? So usually when people come to practice meditation, including in the temples, this is the story that's given, that we should appreciate our precious opportunity to be able to come and do the practice, to apply our limited intellect and start to understand, start to grasp what enlightenment might be. The topic of enlightenment means that there is a summum bonum in philosophical terms. That means there is an ultimate good. And in philosophy, this is one of the three main questions. What is the ultimate good? The lesser goods are things to eat, things to drink. Medium goods, things like Marmite. These are things that we can experience. We have nice clothes and nice friends. We go and see a nice concert or show of some kind. These are all kinds of pleasant things that we can do. All kinds of unpleasant things, Marmite for you, right? That you can avoid. Paying tax, you can avoid that one. So is that what life is about? Is that what being an animal is about? Finding pleasurable things and avoiding unpleasurable things. Is that what we are? We're DNA machines that are programmed to do this. Or is there in fact some higher good, some hidden, if you like? This is why we call people who are interested in this, who have an inkling, have a suspicion or idea that there actually is a summum bonum, there is an ultimate or enlightenment, that we spend some of our time and opportunity to try and follow this path. That makes us a mystic. And I like this word mystic. I wish I'd known this word mystic when I was a kid. You know, when your school teachers come saying, what are you going to be when you grow up? Like, I'm going to be a mystic. I don't think my parents would have been very happy. In fact, when I was young, I wanted to be an inventor. And it made my parents and school teachers very angry. They said, you can't be an inventor. It's not a thing. Other kids at the time wanted to be astronauts because it was the 1970s, right? I was born in the year man landed on the moon. I like to say man landed on the moon, I landed on the earth. And so kids said, I want to be an astronaut. Oh, that's nice, he wants to be an astronaut. But I say I want to be an inventor, that you can't be an inventor. It's more likely than being an astronaut, let's face it. So to be a mystic means that we are going into the mystery. And that mystery is, what is it? What is this thing that lives? What is this life force? Turning the attention around and bringing it inwards. It's called an inner journey, an inner path, right? And that's an accurate description. When we turn the attention around and look back at oneself, the self starts to disappear, and what we see are processes. We see things happening according to a structure. Usually when we turn around and look inwards too, things start to reverse in many ways. So externally, the more I can get, the happier I'll be. That's why people steal and fight and con people. when you turn around inside, you know the more you give away, the happier you are. The less that I get, the happier I am. Society is kind of coming to this now with downsizing, right? That people starting to realize that actually if I've got a stable roof over my head and enough food, enough Marmite, then I'm happy. A few years ago I was in Singapore and we were walking around going to some Dharma talk, and the person had got the address wrong. And we were wandering around in some really rich, super rich area with these huge mansions. I don't know how anyone can afford a huge mansion in Singapore, and as we walked past one, we walked up a driveway to see if this is a house, and there's a big glass window, and there's a guy in there reading his book. And he looked like he's the owner of the house. I presume he was. And he's sitting on a sofa reading his book, and I thought, I do that in my temple. I don't have a sofa, but I have a seat that I lean against the wall. I sit in my seat and read my book. What's the difference in happiness level between that guy and me? Yet he has to buy all of this and maintain it, then he has to have a guard to guard it. When you turn around and look directly inwards, one of the remarkable things you find is you need very little to be happy. The people who are happy has actually got very little to do with money and wealth, and it's got to do with habits in the mind. Whether you have a habit of finding joy in the small things around you. When I first started practicing meditation, I worked in a jazz club. It's not a very conducive environment for doing meditation. And there's a restaurant on one side of the road and then the jazz club on the opposite side. And so after we'd got the building set up for the evening rush, about 5:30, I would go over to the bathrooms in the other restaurant. And I just had a little space, it's about 4 meters long. And I'd just do walking meditation. I used to so look forward to that half an hour. And if anybody came, I'd just pretend I was going into the bathroom. And just to walk backwards and forwards and breathe, even in the bathroom, and breathe. And I could just snatch that really beautiful moment. And that was the highlight of my working day. My job wasn't that bad. It's just I knew how to find happiness, find joy in those small things. So we have this opportunity today to come along and start this process of turning the attention inwards. The spiritual path, by the way, accelerates. So as you do it, it feeds into itself and it accelerates itself. So we've already gone through the hard bits. You've already gone through the thousands or millions of lifetimes of ignorance, suffering, and you've already got to this point. From this point on, it's going to accelerate. If you read the accounts of people who get enlightened, it always really accelerates right the way up to the last thing. So if it seems impossible, then don't think that way. Things that I thought were impossible now are so easy. I used to look at the monks when I go to the temple and they sit there like this. I thought, if I could just sit in the same posture for 6 minutes, then I'd be really happy. And then I learned to sit, and if I could just stop my mind falling asleep, and then my mind stops falling asleep, if I could just stop my mind from thinking. And it always seemed so impossible to me when I looked around or listened to teachers, or especially the suttas, because the suttas are very short and sharp. They're like, it's easy, what you do, give up desire, boom, you're enlightened, off you go. So you start to calculate, I give up desire. I did this once in an all-night sitting in Amravati in the temple, and I thought, I'm going to sit on this square, and I'm not going to move. I'm not going to give in to desire until the bell goes in the morning. It was an all-night sitting. And then after First hour, of course, I'm like this. And the second hour, and the third hour, I'm swinging around. But then I realized I want the bathroom. I thought, am I breaking my vow if I go to the bathroom? My vow to sit on this seat all night? How do you avoid not wanting to go to the bathroom? This enlightenment business, it's impossible. Things get clearer. Things get easier. And the things that you thought you'd never be able to do, you find that actually a few years later you can do. When you're at work, it's so hard to just have any mindfulness because you're busy and you're moving around. And then suddenly, mindfulness starts popping up in places and areas that you didn't expect. When I first started meditating, this was being an English man. I used to drink a little bit, never very much. Actually, I like to drive my car, so I didn't drink very much. But I'd still go to the pub and we'd play pool and drink. And I'd been on a meditation retreat. And I came back to stay in the house where I'd been staying. This is in New Zealand, and there's nothing to do if you don't go to the pub. I mean, that's it. And we were in there playing pool, and I had a couple of, in New Zealand they sell beer in jugs. It's a classy country, right? So I was drinking my jug of beer, and I was playing pool, and because I'd been on retreat, suddenly mindfulness came up. I was like, it's like suddenly you wake up, and you're like, suddenly the oppression of the noise, and the drunk people kind of shouting, and the smells. And then I looked at pool and like, why am I trying to knock this ball into that hole? This is being gripped by a sense of unreality, or in Buddhism it's called nibbida, or disenchantment. And I love this word because the world enchants you. Enchanting is what trolls and witches do to you, right? They cast a spell on you so that you can't operate, and so that you're deluded. So there'll be two princesses, a beautiful princess and a horrible princess, and she will cast a spell on the young prince to marry her, and then he can't see the truth. Something like that. This is what the world does. It enchants you. Enchants you with TV programs and computers and clothes and prestige, and I mean all of these things get so absorbing, and then suddenly when you get mindful, you're like, what do I have here that means anything? I find it difficult when I look around. The things that mean something, like if you have children, that means something. Looking after your health, that would mean something. But the things that really mean something and matter are relatively few compared to the things that people chase and do and spend their time on. So this practice accelerates as we do it. Things that seemed impossible or difficult won't be. You don't know also whether you might be right on the cusp of getting enlightened. You might have been practicing for 5 lifetimes. Now you hear one word from me and you're like, and you get enlightened. Then you'll say, Bhante, you're so wonderful. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know what you know now. So what you will find a trigger around you in the environment to when you are ready for enlightenment. And I've met quite a few probably enlightened people at the time. One man was very interesting. On the final steps, one of the characteristics of the path is you get extremely confused. And so I can recognize where he is on his path because I've read about it, but I'm not there myself. And so he's very confused. He's like, well, now I don't know what to do. His self had disappeared. He has no more will and intention. It's a strange thing. I'm like, well, it's just going to accelerate as you get towards the end. So this is our framework story. You don't know, You don't know about your past and your past lives, how many lives you've spent getting to the point of a human being. You may have spent lifetimes practicing. You may be just on the ready to cusp. So if anyone does get enlightened today, then let me know. So we're going to be doing a fair bit of sitting together. I'll answer some questions. We'll do a talk in the afternoon. Is everybody ready? Put forth some effort and some energy into starting to develop this practice, starting to wake up. Is it too early in the morning to wake up? Right?